February is always a difficult month for me. Firstly, it holds many painful personal anniversaries and is often a health low point due to the cold, damp and dark of the British winter. And so every year as February approaches, I prepare myself for what I know will be a really hard 4 weeks. I usually manage to get through my very own cruelest month by throwing myself into my work and blocking out everything else until the snowdrops have gone and the daffodils arrive. But this year, despite many grand plans for Finish It February, the Daisy Blouse, daily videos and stash busting, January brought with it a whole load of unexpected challenges, and my precarious mental health, already at breaking point from the seasonal depression, fell apart in spectacular fashion. I am blessedly okay now. Some medication changes, the support of my family and friends, the never-ending patience of my partner Woody, many cuddles from Sagan, and the simple act of just acknowledging to myself that I'm not coping and stepping back from some things have meant that I have recovered quickly to a place where I feel able to face things again. But the effort it took to carry on, with filming, with the Daisy Blouse, with any kind of crafting, well, I simply couldn't hide it. So the little footage that I did take in February, which I had hoped at the time I could edit together into a cosy vlog, has been incredibly difficult to watch back, as it is so clear that I was not coping. One of the things people frequently say to me as a disabled and chronically ill person is, "Oh, I don't know how you cope," or some such variation of that. But the reality is, I don't know how I cope. Am I even coping? Because I've certainly not been coping well. What does coping well even look like? Because it certainly doesn't look like this. Watching this footage back makes me realise that usually I am able to hide the moments when I'm not doing so well, but there's no hiding in this footage. I thought long and hard about whether I even wanted to include it in case it's too upsetting, for me and you. But maybe it's good that people see it. As vulnerable as I feel to share it, maybe I need to admit publicly just how much I've been struggling, so I stop beating myself up about not meeting my own unrealistic expectations. I don't know why I decided in this most vulnerable of moments to try and tackle the most complicated crochet and knitting project I've ever worked on. I guess the pressure of Finish It February got to me, not to mention the guilt I've been feeling about putting this project off until this moment, only to have found myself yet again so ill that I've been unable to do all the things I wanted to. The self-loathing one, I suppose. I hadn't done nothing on this project all year. I spent a long time in the summer figuring out the logistics of it all. I was worried that when I picked it back up, I would have forgotten everything I had figured out, but I had actually made more progress than I had realised, which made things easier. Also, having the footage to watch back helped. I have been sat here for 45 minutes, reading over these instructions, trying to figure this out. Oh my God, I finally think I've got it. So I've got my stitch markers, and hopefully we can do a bit of colour coding and I'll show you what I mean. I think part of the thing that was tripping me up is the seam here. It's not edge to edge like that, it's slightly round to the front. So that will eventually go there like that. And the reason why only 7 of these are joined is because I thought you were going to seam up the sleeves as they are, but no, there's going to be 2 more rows of daisies here for extra sleeve volume. So that's why there's 2 daisies flapping about on the end here, like that, because they've got to be attached to things, and this one has to sort of pivot. So it is counted from this end. So I'm joining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, this bit. So let's use light green. That picot there is going to go to the picot between these 2. So do I have another light green one? Yes. So I haven't done the picot yet because it's come unravelled, but you get the gist. So those 2 will get joined together. Actually, that's a drawing locking stitch markers, isn't it? We can make it work. And then the 8 along here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, will get joined. So let's do that in yellow. Again, I haven't got the picots yet for these, but we'll improvise. And then, like I say, I thought I was then going to join the sleeve seam, but I'm not joining it, I'm just finishing it off, because at the minute those petals are flapping in the breeze. See what I mean? And I'm going to put the edging on. So I'm going to go down here, around here, back to where my yellows are joined together, and then I'm going to seam this end to this end. So I'm running out of colours now, aren't I? Let's do dark green. So that's going to get seamed to that petal, like that, and down here. Then we break the yarn. Okay, so that will be seamed to there. Let's just clip it in place. Let's use a pink one so I know it's just structural. Okay, so then I will have this seam open, the body will all be joined up, and this sleeve will be open, but also it doesn't have this shoulder section. So then it says I skip 5, and one of the things I'd forgotten is that the underarm seam is 9 daisies wide, but the shoulder is 10 daisies wide. And so I think that is why we've got these extra that are not attached. Something like that anyway. So then it says I skip 5 for the back neckline, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to start joining more daisies here. I'm not sure exactly, I need to double check the instructions, which picots go into which picot. So I'm then adding daisies here, joining the top there to each other. And then I'm going to come to this corner, add 2 more rows of daisies here, join them here, and then do the same thing on the other side. And then I think we're there. But do you see what I mean? It's starting to look more top-shaped. My only worry is this seems really short. But anyway, I'm also looking at this now and thinking to myself, should I block it now? I really want to crack on with it. It's been hanging over me for months. And I've done all the thinking. And I'm scared I'm going to forget what I'm doing. Let's just carry on and I'll block it at the end. It would be nice to be able to block it flat and really get those petals stretched out flat. But I mean, the one on the front cover doesn't look like it's blocked, so what a palaver. Now, if none of that made any sense to you, that's okay. I highly doubt anyone watching this is actually going to attempt to make one of these things. And if you are thinking about it, I strongly advise you not to if you value your sanity. But the good news is I was able to pick things up again without having to do too much thinking. It took me a little while to get back into the flow of the technique for crocheting around the daisies, but given it had been months since I'd done it last, that's not surprising. What I did find unexpected was that I started to really enjoy the repetition of it all. Don't get me wrong, I frequently went wrong, had to fix mistakes, and had to abandon what I was doing in frustration. But every now and again I would get into a flow and I was able to experience that feeling that people talk about when they talk about crafts being good for your mental health. This process is incredibly fiddly. Firstly, a 2.5mm crochet hook and fingering weight yarn is enough to put most crocheters off. But as if making 371 individual daisies wasn't enough, joining them all together takes several steps, uses mostly chain stitches and slip stitches, and involves making sense of instructions and keeping track of everything you've done previously so you know which petal is the 12th and which daisy is the 21st. It doesn't just require fiddly techniques, but so much concentration. But I kept plugging away at it. It turned out I had done most of the more complicated construction last year. I was down to joining the shoulder and the underarm seams, and of course sewing it all up with the knitted sections. Now, I was sure I had made enough daisies. I counted several times, but I either miscounted, lost some, or, as is also possible with 1930s patterns, the instructions were wrong. Either way, I found myself 2 daisies short. You may remember that I had previously run out of yarn and a kind follower had sent me some from the Netherlands, thank you Micah, and I must thank you once again because Micah had the prudence to not just send me 1 extra skein but 2, and it turned out, thanks to my missing 2 daisies, that I would need to crack into the second skein, only for the tiniest amount that I couldn't have finished the blouse without it. Seeing the body of the Daisy Blouse all together in one piece after so much time and effort was really surreal. I really couldn't believe I had done it. But also, I'd become so desensitized to the fact that this was a garment I could wear. It was a real shock to see it on. For me, it had become this almost fantastical, abstract piece of endless grind and frustration. I couldn't believe I might actually have made something wearable. I couldn't really comprehend that it might actually get finished. I was brought sharply back down to earth by the realisation that the ribbing around the waist was now too small. I started this project nearly 3 years ago when I was a good 2 dress sizes smaller, and while the blouse section fit through the bust, even at full stretch the ribbing was too snug. After a brief crisis, I decided to focus on something else. I didn't want to make any hasty decisions about frogging it and re-knitting it when I was already dealing with all these mixed emotions, so I just started weaving in the many, many ends.
Oh, for Pete's sake, I didn't get any scissors.
Yes, I'm using my fabric scissors for this. I needed the spring-loaded action more than I worried about dulling the blades. I'm never really sure how best to weave in ends on crochet, never mind a crochet garment that is primarily holes. I did my best to follow the chain stitches, but also secure the ends so the yarn wouldn't come undone. But essentially, I made it up as I went along, adapting my technique to best fit whatever part of the garment I was working on. My next dilemma was how on earth do I block this thing? I knew I wanted to block the white section without the ribbing attached in case the blue yarn bled into the white. Plus, the lacy nature of the fabric meant that this thing was not going to be left anywhere Sagan, my partner's lovable but insistently curious Hungarian Vizsla, could get anywhere near it. Conveniently, I spent most of the month back at my parents' house due to getting ordinary sick on top of my chronic illnesses. Woody takes excellent care of me, but he does have, a job. Meaning when I'm so ill I require 24/7 supervision, I have to go back to my parents full time. And this February I needed a lot of extra support. Just when you think you've got enough to deal with, life finds a way to humble you with a violent stomach bug and a week in bed. I was really struggling during this period. I felt so disgusting. The last thing I wanted to work on was a lacy, white 1930s crochet project of extravagant proportions and complex construction that might not even fit me in the end anyway. I wouldn't normally do this on the floor either, but the scale of the Daisy Blouse meant it didn't fit on any surface in my parents' house other than a double bed, which was where I ended up leaving it to dry. I tried really hard to make every daisy sit perfectly, but crawling around on the floor like this was a terrible decision on my part, and I ended up just having to do as much as my joints would allow and hope it turned out okay. In the end, I think I did get enough tension on the fabric to get the daisies to lie nicely, and without my body taking its vengeance on my knees and back. Sewing the ribbing on had to wait until March when I was back with Woody and Sagan. It took me several attempts to figure out how to do this, both in terms of spacing and just stitch technique. I had to unpick several times, and I'm still not entirely sure I used the best method for sewing them together, but I couldn't find any information about specifically sewing knitted ribbing to crochet chain stitches, so I just had to make it up. Of course, the original vintage instructions provided no details on this matter. Each section had to be eased in at a different rate, so while I could do a pretty solid 3:1 ratio for the cuffs, that was different for the hem and then different again for the yoke. Indeed, the yoke had to be uneven to accommodate the fact there are more daisies across the front than the back. The locking stitch markers helped a lot with this, but I very much winged the whole process. As March got into the swing of things, it became warm enough to sit in the garden and work. Something that was massively beneficial for my health in terms of pain, mood, and vitamin D absorption. To be able to finish off the sewing up outside transformed the process from an incredibly draining slog to a pleasure I looked forward to. You can only imagine my excitement when it finally got to a stage where I could try it on properly. Welcome to March. I'm not sure about this neckline, you know. I don't know. Maybe I need to look at the pictures. But there's something, the rib here is so loose and it gapes and it doesn't follow the angle of my shoulders at all, and it sort of sits weird. But yeah, there's just something about this circular yoke that's off. And it's kind of here. It just stands away from the body so much. And I don't currently have the wherewithal, brain power to figure out why or how to fix it. Also, I mean, like, how insane is this top? It's just absolutely mental. I can't believe it's nearly done after all this time. And I was really worried because when I first sewed on the bottom band, it didn't fit. Since then, I've been very ill and I haven't been able to eat, and it fits now. So, win some, you lose some, I guess. What am I going to wear this with? Do I need to wear it? The thing that gets me is, like, so this is a pattern from Great Depression era America. What's he called? FDR? Yeah, that era America. What? Who in that era had the time or the inclination to make something like this? I had to study it for GCSE, it's been a long time, but like, you really telling me that there were like 1930s housewives making clothes for their children from feed sacks, but also meticulously crocheting together 371 daisies that they had to buy a special gadget to make, and then knitting and hand sewing on all these ribbed pieces. Oh, and I've still got to hand make the buttons. I mean, maybe there were. Maybe I just need elastic round the neck. I have to crochet a band here and at the bottom now in the blue, and then I've got to make the buttons and then it's done. I mean, I have to make 16 buttons, so it's just bonkers. It's just bonkers. The neckline on this definitely fits a lot tighter than it does on me. So definitely going to be reinforcing it somehow. I also, don't know if you can see, the buttons are crochet, and so I've got to make the crochet buttons, and there's a crochet button stand on here, and I'm going to add one there because it's a bit tight on me. I'm not sure I'm well enough to do it today. One of the things about the buttons is it said to use pearl buttons to crochet over as a mould. So I mean, I bought the size pearl buttons it said, but quite a few of them are not flat. They've got a slight curve to them, so I'm not really sure how this is going to work. Crocheting the button stands was simple enough. Single crochet along the knitted rib, and then on one half making buttonholes for the neck opening. Like I say, I also added a little bit of crochet to the ribbing at the bottom just so it could overlap a bit where it was a bit snug on me, despite the unintentional week-long fast courtesy of the aforementioned stomach bug. I was a bit nervous because the crochet edging made the ribbing warp a little bit. I just had to hope it would even out when on the body, seeing as knitting is stretchier than crochet. Of all the repetitive and tedious steps on this project, crocheting over these 15mm shell buttons was easily my least favourite. It was incredibly awkward. To start with, the 1930s instructions had you chain 4 to make a loop and then crochet into that. I soon realised that it was just easier and neater to do magic loop, but I had several failed attempts before I realised what was going on and how I could improve it. The pearl buttons were slippery for me to hold, and I snapped several while trying to pull the crochet tight. I also realised after about 4 buttons I'd actually missed an entire round of the pattern instructions. I tried doing it as written, but found they ended up too big to cover the buttons snugly anyway, so just went back to what I was doing. It really felt never ending. Thank goodness for mica and the second ball of yarn, because I wouldn't have been able to do the buttons without it. And while they were incredibly annoying, I do think they looked good in the end. But every stitch was a struggle. It felt like these buttons were one final metaphor for the whole project. But then all I had to do was sew them on. Another weirdly fiddly and annoying task, although I do wonder whether that had more to do with my current state of mind than the task itself. But was that really it? Had I actually done it? Through everything, had I finally finished my longest running work in progress? Now, I make no apologies for the gratuitous amount of reveal footage I included in this video. Let me enjoy my moment, okay? And yes, it was freezing on this day and I smiled so much I got lipstick all over my teeth, but let's just pretend that you can't see it. Can you tell that I love it? It's bonkers, totally impractical, doesn't keep you warm as the breeze just goes right through the gaps in the fabric, will surely snag on anything and everything you brush up against. I dread having to wash it, but I did it. I made the world's most outrageous 1930s crochet pattern. Normally, in my garment making, especially my knitting, if I make a mistake, I will just rip back and fix it. And while, if you followed along with last year's saga, you will know I've made plenty of mistakes and ripped back several times already, as I was working on the finishing of this project, I noticed even more mistakes. Missed petals, wonky joins, uneven spacing, but the complex, continuous construction of the garment meant that there was nothing that could be done. If I spotted a mistake in the first 3 rows of the pattern at this stage, my only option would be to start again. Not to mention that the construction means that the join where I started my new different dye lot yarn from mica in the Netherlands is unfortunately really obvious in person, as it lies front and centre right across the chest. Yet, does any of this matter? For the first time ever on a project of mine, I can truly say, no, it doesn't. I don't care. As much as I talk about not being bothered when things go wrong on other projects, there is always a part of me that is hyper aware of the flaws in it. As much as I try to not be a perfectionist about it, to overlook my work's shortcomings is a choice I have to actively make and continue to make. But not with this piece. I just love it. And I could come out with some cheesy crap about the imperfections making it even more beautiful, but I don't really believe that. What's more important to me is that I did it. It was hard. It was really hard to keep going on this project. It has hung over me for years, and having shared it online when things were better in my life, I have been followed around by this guilt of not working on it and shame of letting you all down who had taken such an interest in this project and shown me such support. I had to finish it, but at times it just felt impossible. And this year, to arrive in February, already at breaking point, but to have somehow found a way to keep going, to have actually finished it after all this time, that's all that matters. The Daisy Blouse will forever stand as a reminder of my own perseverance, or perhaps stubbornness. It will be all the evidence I need to convince myself that I can make it through, that progress is made step by tiny step and in a confusing, non-linear order, that I cannot do this alone, and that as vulnerable as it feels to ask for help, it's never an admission of failure, but a moment to connect with you and your struggles, that making mistakes or taking a break or having to go backwards is not shameful. How can I be ashamed of this? This ridiculous project, look at it! It makes me so happy. It's done. I did it. And I feel like Ginger Rogers when I wear it. I couldn't have done it without you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.